Maria BBC whānau, good to see you all. It's nice to be here this morning. It's always hard to come and preach after Monica's been preaching, okay? So she says she's talking me up today, but actually I've been daunted this week. She did such a fantastic sermon last week. If you haven't heard it, you need to go and listen to it because it actually sets us up well for our series, okay? A Formed Life. And so I want to encourage you, go and grab that online. Do get a hold of it. It's worth listening to. But she started our Formed Life series with this beautiful imagery, the process of pottery formation and the way that the kiln affects and changes it through the firing process. That in the fiery furnace, the pottery gains its strength and its resilience. The problem is that we live in a culture of comfort and pain avoidance, don't we? Everything about our world is about minimizing those things in our life. And technology is trying to do that. Every workplace is trying to do that. But the problem with that is that we desire the process and the journey to success and greatness to be as smooth and bumpyless as possible. We essentially want to lose weight whilst still eating donuts, right? I mean, the scientist in this world who's going to come up with a calorie-free donut that still tastes like a donut, that man's going to be a millionaire, I'm telling you. Amen. There's a few amens in the room. Some people on diets in this room. But we forget, actually, that a part of processes, there's always a starting point. There is always a starting point. When we make pottery, whatever we begin actually has to begin somewhere, and often it's hard. Some of you doting parents, from kindergarten days, you still have one of these things sitting somewhere in your house. It's ugly. But because your child made it once upon a time in kindergarten, it still sits on your mantelpiece somewhere. Just throw it out, they won't know. It ends up being on a shelf somewhere and it's full of, like old coins and, some knitting needle or something, lint, rubbish. Basically, it just sits there. But these colorful, misshaped things, maybe you've used for years for these things. We would be forgiven for thinking that only the most perfectly shaped and elegant specimens make for the best use and purpose. And the reality is these things are still around 20 years on. It's probably, I just grabbed that off the internet, that's probably like worth thousands of dollars. It's probably some artist's rendition of something. I don't know. But anyway, who's to say? However, what we will wrestle with in the story of Joseph is a story and a family history which is anything but perfect. And over these weeks, we're going to understand a little bit more about how the sovereignty of God prevails over evil, and still that there's a family line here that leads to the Messiah. Through the dysfunction, through the brokenness, through all of these different things, we understand something about the character and nature of who God is and what he's doing in and through our journeys. And I think it's important for us to hold on to that. As we're reading the section of story we're going to be reading today, I want you to keep an ear out for Jesus' story in the midst of this. There's some apparitions, there's these little moments where you go, actually, Jesus went through these same things. A bit of an origin story about the future generations' trials and tribulations as well. So we're going to be reading, it's going to be on the screen for you from Genesis 37. We're doing 3 weeks in chapter 37. Pastor Eric's on next week. We think that here in this particular chapter is actually the whole, center of all the theming and the ideas that sort of flow on for the rest of the story. So we encourage you to join with us in this. So we're going to be reading from verses 12 through to verse 24. Okay, verse 12. Now his brothers, Joseph's brothers, had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. It's 50 miles away, okay, from Hebron. That's 80 kilometers. That's a long way. It's like we walked to Whakatane to feed the sheep, all right? And Israel, Jacob, which is his other name, said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. Huh, just go for a walk for 80 kilometers. Thanks, Dad. Someone else was sent to an unwelcoming people, and there was danger along the way. I wonder who that might have been. And so he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. They sent him off to the valley of Hebron. Now, I don't know about you, this is a 17-year-old kid. We sort of established his kind of age range. Would you send them off for a 5-day hike to see the brothers who don't really like him? Anyone? Anyone? Any of the older siblings in here? You're like, yeah, bring it on, all right? So this is part of the story. You're getting it. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? It's pretty obvious when you pass through areas in the ancient Near East, people started worrying whether or not there was a war following you or you were someone spying out the land for somebody else, all right? So, of course, someone comes out and asks him. And he replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks? And it's probably not hard to pick 11 brothers, okay, walking together and grazing all of their goats or sheep or whatever they had, okay? So it's pretty obvious. And he says, the stranger says to him, they have moved on from here. The man answered, I've heard them say, let's go to Dothan. That's another 15 miles or 24 kilometers away. Yay, let's go for another day-long walk to try and find my brothers. And so Joseph went after his brothers and he found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance. Why did they see him in the distance? He was wearing something they noticed. And before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. And there's that famous line that Mon used last week, here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him. Let's throw him into one of these cisterns and say that ferocious animals devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. You can just see what's coming out from this hatred, this pain that these brothers are carrying about Joseph. And then Reuben says this, when Reuben heard it, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness. A cistern is like basically carved out of rock underground. It just held water for animals and people passing through. But don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. A little side note, Reuben is the one that slept with one of his mums, all right? Like, well, out of a guy. Little detail for you. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took it from him and they threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty and there was no water in it. My story. A few years back now, a lot of years back now, I was 14, and we attended a family reunion deep in Ngāti Porou territory, Te Araroa. Anyone been to Te Araroa? Wow, you people need to get out, okay? It's around the East Cape, way out there. It is one of the most idyllic, beautiful, untouched places, and that's mostly because it's stuck in a time warp, okay? When you drive through there, you think you're going back into the 70s. That's why they filmed the movie Boy there, because it didn't have to change much. It's a pretty amazing place. But when you get there, you see all sorts of things. My cousins, okay, they used to take a piece of rope and they would lasso a horse and they would ride it bareback down the street and go surfing and then take it back. It wasn't their horse, but that's what they do. That's what you do on the East Coast. It's also a place where there's only one genre of music, I found out. It's written by Bob Marley. There is no other artists that they know of. Spotify wasn't around back then, but Bob still was in their hearts. What was customary for us as a family when we got to our marae was that we'd be welcomed on. There would be this traditional porphyry because we had family coming from deep south and far north. We'd come together. I think there was about 1,200 of us that came together for this time. And there was, each whānau there was, had the honouring task of bringing a photograph of one of their recently deceased ancestors of mana and prominence to the marae. And these pictures would be displayed in one corner of the marae a bit like a cloud of great witnesses watching over the gathering, The family connection, the legacy, everything that has been passed down to us as a family is kind of centered around these people who have passed it on to us. Now, my grandfather was the eldest son, and he was seen as a bit of a family leader, a kaumatua to the family. And when we got to the gate, I was handed his photo, and it's quite a big photo, and apparently it was quite an honor. The only problem is my uncle was there, who is his eldest son, and he already hated me. And he took exception to the fact that I had been given that great privilege, and promptly snatched the photo from my hands and told me to take a hike with more colourful language than that. Which, to be honest, as a 14-year-old, grumpy uncle, whatever, I didn't actually understand the privilege that was there. I just said, oh, whatever, mate, it's all yours. The problem for him, however, was one of my aunties who was sitting over on the paipai at the marae. She saw what transpired from a distance, and she came a marching over. And my aunties, they aren't tall ladies, but they are to be feared. They're women of great mana. Everyone just looked at each other, and everyone, ooh, something's going down. Someone's going to get a hiding, or just an earful or a bit of a clip. Now, there's another segue I need to make here. Is that Apanui woman, okay? I just need to say that if my family hear this online, they'll think this is hilarious. Apanui women, they are strong and fearless. They're never short of opinions or strong words. They have no problem letting you know what they think, whether or not you want to hear it or not. And she walked straight up to my uncle, and she yanked the photo out of his hands. She waved her finger in his face and said a whole bunch of sentences in Māori and English, full of expletives, I'm sure. And then, because I'd moved back in the pack, and then she just did that look at me. You know when your grumpy auntie looks at you? And she just looked at me and, to attention, come over, and she handed me the photo. I think it's hilarious, but anyway. Everyone just stared at my uncle as he slinked back into the group of people. Quite an embarrassing moment for him, I'm sure. Apparently, it wasn't his right to undermine the custom, and that I was the firstborn grandson, and it was my job, not his. Needless to say, that episode in our relationship only sealed his hatred for me, and the perceived favored status within our family that he thought I had. And he'd thought that for many years. And every day that I saw him after that, until he died, he tried to make my life a misery, because he perceived that I was the favorite, but he was the oldest son. When you get to Joseph's story, most of us in some way resonate with the brother's hatred. Here's this upstart 17-year-old who dad clearly favors after. His mum, Rachel, who was, as Monica put it, his favorite baby mama, sister mama. What was it, Mon? Something like that. Rachel was his favorite wife. And Joseph is the son of his favorite wife. And most commentators say at this point in the story, Rachel has passed away. And dad is probably looking at Joseph as a reminder of his favorite wife, and no doubt has protected him, probably mollycoddled him a little bit. We all know the babies of the family get treated different, don't we? All the eldest in the room like me, yep, they get treated different. All the babies are like, yes, we do. The mere fact that his brothers were out there, tending to animals miles from home cements Joshua's unfavorable status with the brothers. He was probably sitting at home getting pampered by mums, getting fed, doing not much. They're out there grunting away for 5 or so days in the heat and in the dangerous areas. I can understand. And then drops up dad's favorite, rested and in the flesh. You can imagine it. And he was wearing what? The symbol of his favoritism. his fancy coat like a flag, waving it in their face. No wonder they hated him. See, the problem with favoritism is that favoritism breeds jealousy. It breeds envy and resentment. And the Bible is so full of little examples where it says we need to reject favoritism at every space we can. The problem with favoritism is that if you are the favorite, you're generally oblivious to the depths of that favoritism as well. And to add to that, his relative immaturity, his youthful pride, and we have this perfect storm. And Joseph is about to feel its full force. And I'm sure, like most of the brothers in that space, they coveted that favored status. I mean, I don't know if any of you are the favorite child at home, you know? Do you get the extra bit of meal? Do you get those extra things? Even in our family, there's this little fight that goes on about who's the favorite. You're all the favorite, darlings, we all say. There's a favorite, you know it. I'm sure, like most of us here, jealousy and envy have captured us at some point. Jealousy and envy play out in all sorts of ways today. John Walton, who's one of the commentators on this passage, he says this. He says, what the envier wants is not first of all what another has. What an envier wants is for the other not to have it. They didn't care about the coat. They cared about the favoritism. An envier resents not only somebody else's blessing, but also the one who has been blessed. So there's that object of the blessing and then the person who gets the blessing. They absolutely hated it. And see, Joseph coming over that pass with his fancy coat on played right into this, possibly without even knowing. You jump forward to the book of James and it says, favoritism is forbidden for a reason. Because it's corrosive. It has this toxic, catalytic kind of element that destroys relationships. But we still do it. And our modern advertising world don't help this. They sell products so you can be envied, don't they? It's like an admirable thing to be envied. I think about all the celebrities that walk around in whatever they're wearing, doing whatever they're doing, hopping on their private planes or living a life that everyone thinks that they want to live. But the reality is they're creating an element of envy so that you will buy and so that you will follow. This is the world we live in. Jealousy and envy may never take us as far as Joseph's brothers, but in its subtlety, it can be just as damaging. I mean, have you ever mocked or slandered or insulted a co-worker or a colleague hoping to make yourself look better in comparison? See, some of that is birthed out of this just jealousy and envy, the sense of favoritism that someone might have. And I'm sure Joseph and his brothers had their excuses in their hearts for what they were plotting to make themselves feel better about the resentment and Joseph's excesses. I want to take a segue here also because Peter Scazzero, he wrote this book, The Emotionally Healthy Church, Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. He has a few leadership axioms, and one of them that speaks right to this point. And that is, often Jesus might be in your heart, but grandpa is in your bones. Yeah? Jesus is in your heart, but grandpa is in your bones. What do I mean by this? It's like a big, an origin backstory in a movie or a TV series. And I have grandma or grandpa in my bones, okay? There is this picture that we see about a person's personality and how they've been raised and all of the struggles and the back history, and you see it all, and then you're sort of supposed to go, okay, well, that's okay that they act like a deviant or that they're broken or whatever, because they've had this back story. And for us to go forward in our faith journey, I think in discipleship and sanctification and growing to be more like Jesus, taking up our cross and losing our lives that we might find it, big statements, but they're all in the Bible. We need to go back. We need to go back into those deeply rooted family origin issues in our history. Go back 3 or 4 generations and see what has been passed down to you and to the next generation. That's what I mean by grandpa in our bones. Okay? What are the things that just continue to perpetuate in your family line because no one's ever dealt with it? It's just become normal. This is how you have been primarily formed, okay? This is how you've been shaped, and it's still probably the most powerful influence on you today is your family of origin story. You see, it's not just about the blessings that get passed down from grandparents, is it? Grandparents have done some amazing things. They've blessed you in so many ways. But it's about the sins of our families that have had a lasting impact generationally. And we just sort of become blind to those things because the blessings are good. When we do pre-marriage counseling with some young couples, we sort of say to them, what are the best things that both your sets of parents and even your grandparents that you can draw into your marriage and hold on to? Name those fantastic things that you see in mum and dad. They love each other, they spend time for each other, We don't ever sort of talk about, well, what is the thing that sits in the background generationally that I actually need to root out? I need to take away. See, it's like a hereditary form of disease that's handed down from one generation to the next. So sin can also make its way through. Just have a look at Joseph's line of influence. You see, 4 generations back from Joseph, we've got lies, sibling rivalry, favoritism, unhealthy marriages, wives upon wives. What has Joseph got in his bones? Those things there. Joseph is being treated as a favorite. There is problems in their sibling rivalry amongst them. Where did it come from? It came from the bones of grandpa. It came from the bones of grandma. It's never been dealt with. Some of you in this room are continuing to allow the bad, the sinful, and whatever to continue to perpetuate in your family line. I think we need to take a look at what God's doing in there. What we do not cut off, we will replicate. What isn't dealt with in one generation, the next is doomed to repeat. In modern language, it's called generational trauma. Passed on and on and on. Why did my uncle harbor such anger and hatred towards me? Well, see, our family of origin, my family of origin story, go back 3 or 4 generations, is spotted with men who never broke the cycle of addiction, who never broke the cycle of violence, who continuously beat their wives, who actually held on to anger like this is in my bones. And for it to stop with me, I've got to do something about it. For Joseph, he's got to do something about it. I can tell you for free that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to drive grandpa out of my bones. But hear me well, there will be things, great things, that you should allow to be infused for the future generations. This isn't a knock on grandparents at all, but what I'm talking about here is the essence. What is being passed on that is sinful, that is broken, that is cursed? Dig it out, people. Getting grandpa or grandma out of our bones is no small task. It may take a lifetime, but it is the Christian task of discipleship and sanctification. And so this morning, I want to inspire you to take a pretty courageous journey. I want to encourage you to go and dig out your family tree. Most of you can actually think right now 1 or 2 things that you've seen come through multiple generations of your family. It's time to cut it off. You see, we need to discern what the sin or the trauma is that's being replicated almost unintentionally without thinking about it. And it's to begin that hard and painful task of cutting that out of our family line forever. I'm still working on that. I still feel those things in my bones that want to come out. And I've got to take hold of those things and push back on them. I want to move on to one last theme that sort of emerges out of this. And it's that the journey matters. The journey matters. If there's one thing that you'll hear repeated over and over in Joseph's story, is that his journey, the hardships of his journey, maketh the man. We like the journey and we like seeing the end of the story. We just don't like what's in the middle of it. I was at a disciplinary hearing this week. I'm on a board of trustees, and we sat across from a student, and I felt God say to me, tell them this. I said, everything good that's to come in life is uphill. Okay? The crowds might be running downhill and away from the things, but everything good in life is uphill. I wanted to encourage the student that actually it's going to be tough for you to turn your life around, but I know you can do it. And everything is in your hands to do that. The journey on the way up matters. See, Joseph may have started as some naive, prideful baby of the family favorite, but we know the end of his story. We know that even what we read today is only the beginning of the trials and the tribulations that he's going to face, because we know his story. Maybe being the baby of the family gave him something of the resilience and the strength that he needs for his future. The thing for us, though, that we find hard is that our books are being written as we live them out. And none of us know what the ending will look like. In fact, none of us know how far from the end we are. But we spend our life inquiring of God instead of leaning on God, saying, God, what is next? What do I need to do? Where are you going to take me? What is the next thing? And we miss what is happening in that moment, in that journey. It's tough. Some of us have looked at Joseph's story with a little bit of envy. It's easy to look and say, well, God had it all planned out for Joseph. And he did. And yet, when it comes to our lives, we don't hold the same unswerving assurance of God's sovereignty. We question him at every corner. I'm pretty sure had you told Joseph at 17 about some of the refining fire experiences that he was going to encounter during his life, he may have chosen the paths he did. I think we all like what he becomes. We just aren't so keen on the same path to greatness. Yet despite often horrific circumstances that Joseph faced, God remained in control, orchestrating events to fulfill his greater purpose. Charles Spurgeon says this. He says, the sovereignty of God is the pillow upon which the child of God rests his head at night, giving him the peace and assurance in all circumstances. It's easy to read that. It's hard to live it, isn't it? That God is in the midst of some of the most corrosive, chaotic evil that some of you have had to face. Through your family line, through circumstances that have had you go, I'm not sure God wanted that for me. I'm not sure he could use that for any good. And you'd be right. Sometimes that is not what God wanted for you. But I can assure you, everything that happens in your life, God can use for his glory and for his purposes. When you're in the midst of that chaos, when you're in the midst of the evil that is being perpetuated against you, it's not easy to see God's hand. But story after story throughout the Bible reminds us that the path most of our biblical heroes walked, the journeys they endured, were in the midst of chaos and confusion and present evil. And the loving hand of God is present. We can be confident of it because the journey matters. No matter how hard it gets, the journey matters. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were threatened with the fiery furnaces and turned to Nebuchadnezzar and they said, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. And then they say this, but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. That is some unquenchable faith in the sovereignty of God. Even if he does not, even if God does not transform the circumstances you're in, he can use them if you allow him to. We can allow those things to shape us for positivity. At some point, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like Joseph and many other patriarchs and matriarchs of our faith, we will have to stand in the face of chaos and evil and say, even if he does not rescue me, I will trust him. I will trust him. Hebrews 11, you read through Hebrews 11, by faith this person, by faith that person. It gets to the end of Hebrews 11, it says, most of them didn't see the things that were promised ahead. But then it goes on to say this. You turn the page to chapter 12, and it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders our Technicolor dreamcoats, and let's run the race with perseverance. The race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. This was the actual heart of Joseph's plight. He ran hard after the things that God had given him. I invite the band to come. I'm going to close just with this. The end of my story is that my uncle who hated me, never-ending hatred for me, was that I got to lead the family at his bedside when he was about to die. He hated me all his life, and I got to sit there with our family surrounding, and they sort of looked to me as the oldest, hey, lead us in this moment. Every single one of them had suffered under his hatred, had suffered under his brokenness, his addictions, his anger, his violence. They were all surrounding his bed. In that moment, I could have said something like, you know what? He deserves to be where he is, and we should smile and walk out of here. But the harder thing to do was to actually lead my family well in that moment. Say, we're not going to allow generational trauma to continue in this space anymore. We're going to, together, I got to lead them in prayer and we prayed over him, but we're going to stomp Granddad out of our bones. See, if we didn't, Granddad would still be in our bones. Would still be in my family line and continuing to perpetuate. It's a lifelong pursuit, but I encourage you, it is well worth you working so hard on it. Let's stand for prayer. Lord, everything worth chasing is a little bit uphill. Lord, even though we may be in the middle of a pretty fiery trial, maybe we are having evil perpetuated against us. That journey matters. You know it and you care about it. Lord, may we have the courage this morning to stand against all of the generational muck that's connected to us. We put that aside and we can strive after the things that you have for our families. We can cut off those things from our generational lines that they will never have an impact ever again. Holy Spirit, would you, in this moment, in your kindness and your love, reveal that to people? And as they lift these things to you, would you go and do that which we cannot? Speak to them, bring truth to them. Would you bring healing, Lord? We ask all of this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.